It started in the middle of July, under an open sky filled with lights, music, and the scent of summer. I was 27 then, living in Portland, working in IT, not exactly a romantic guy by nature. But something about that weekend felt different. It was a music festival outside the city. It's one of those weekend-long escapes where people shed their regular lives and become someone freer, lighter. That's where I met Megan. She wasn't the kind of girl you meet every day, loud, fearless, and gorgeous in a way that didn't come from makeup or clothes. It came from how she talked, how she laughed, how she didn't care who was watching. Her hair was the color of late afternoon sun, strawberry blonde and wild around her shoulders. And her voice carried in a way that made you look for her even before you saw her. I don't even remember the band that was playing when we locked eyes. All I remember is that she smiled, tilted her head, and walked right up to me like we'd known each other for years. She asked me if I liked the music. I said something dumb, nervous, maybe even awkward. But she laughed, really laughed, and just like that, something clicked. We talked for hours that night, sat on the grass, shared drinks, told stories about exes and childhood and what we were running from. Megan was working in digital marketing. Back then, just a year younger than me, and had recently moved from Vancouver to Portland for a job. She had this energy that pulled people in, spontaneous, curious, maybe a little reckless, and yet there was something soft in her too. The kind of softness that shows up in quiet moments when she thought no one was watching. We started seeing each other that same week. It was fast, faster than I'd ever moved with anyone. But it felt right. We went on late-night drives, got lost in conversations that went from movies to trauma to dreams. We stayed up cooking pasta in the middle of the night, laughed, threw hangovers, made out in the back seat like teenagers, and spent lazy Sunday mornings tangled up in each other, half-dressed and completely at peace. She made me feel seen, understood, and loved in the way I didn't know I needed. By the time 6 months passed, we're living together in a small but cozy one-bedroom apartment in Southeast Portland. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We decorated it with secondhand art and coffee mugs from weekend trips. Megan loved plants, too many of them, and I pretended to complain. But secretly, I loved waking up to her little jungle of green every morning. We were in that sweet phase where love is both messy and magical. Arguments came, of course, but even those felt like part of the rhythm. We made up quickly, fiercely, and our sex life. It was fire, real, honest, and intense. There were nights we barely made it past the front door, and then about 9 months in, I met her mom. Her name was Diane. She came to visit from Seattle one weekend in spring. Megan had talked about her before, said they were close, but had a complicated past. Her parents divorced when Megan was 13, and Diane raised her mostly on her own. Megan admired her, even when they clashed. She called her intimidating, but badass. When Diane walked into our apartment that Friday night, I understood exactly what she meant. She had this presence, tall, elegant, dressed in a tailored coat and heels that clicked across our old wooden floors. She looked like she'd stepped out of a courtroom drama. Early 40s, sharp cheekbones, long dark hair tied back in a loose bun, and eyes that seemed to size you up in seconds. She gave me a polite smile, a firm handshake, and immediately scanned the apartment like she was making mental notes. But when she looked at Megan, her whole expression softened. There was warmth there, real love. We all had dinner that night. Nothing fancy, just tacos and wine. But the conversation flowed. Diane was surprisingly funny, with this dry wit that made Megan roll her eyes and laugh. I liked her instantly. She asked about my job, my family back in Arizona, and what my intentions were with her daughter. She said it with a half smile, but I knew there was seriousness behind the question. I told her honestly that I loved Megan, and I saw a future with her. Diane nodded slowly and gave me this long, unreadable look. That weekend, I saw a different side of Megan, daughter Megan. She was softer, more careful with her words. There was history there. some invisible tension that ran under the surface of their bond. But there was love too. Deep, real, and hard-earned. I remember watching them together, thinking how lucky I was. I had a girlfriend who I was crazy about, a woman I truly respected. And now I'd met her mother, someone equally impressive, in a completely different way at that time. I never imagined what would happen later, the line I would cross, the mistake that would unravel everything. Back then, all I saw was the beginning of something beautiful, a love that felt like forever. Asterisk love doesn't always fade in loud, obvious ways. Sometimes it slips out quietly, day by day, in the space between two people who used to be everything to each other. That's what started happening with Megan and me. At first, I didn't even notice it. We were still living together, still laughing at the same dumb Netflix shows, still sharing the same bed. But the warmth, that deep, effortless connection we once had, it started to cool. It began after she got promoted to lead strategist at her firm. I was proud of her, truly. She'd worked hard, stayed late for months, missed weekends, and I had cheered her on every step of the way. But the new role came with more travel, more pressure, and longer hours. I told myself it was temporary, that we'd find our rhythm again, but the truth is, we never did. Megan started flying out almost every other week. Chicago, Toronto, sometimes back-to-back trips. When she was home, she was tired, distracted. Her phone was always buzzing with emails, Slack messages, and last-minute Zoom calls. Our conversations became functional. Can you feed Luna? Did you pay the gas bill? I'll be late again tonight. We were two adults trying to hold on, but something had already begun to unravel. I missed her, not just her. Body beside me, but her spirit, her laughter, the way she used to kiss me when I wasn't expecting it. Our kisses felt rushed, like habits. Our sex life, once passionate and playful, had become rare, quiet, almost mechanical. I told myself she was stressed, that things would go back to normal. But I started to feel like a roommate instead of a partner. Then came the Toronto trip. It was a last-minute work conference. She told me about it over dinner on a Wednesday night, her tone casual, like it wasn't a big deal. But something in me ached. I nodded, told her to be safe, and kissed her goodbye that Friday morning without knowing that everything was about to change. That same afternoon, Megan's mom, Diane, called. She was in Portland for a few days, visiting friends, and offered to stop by to check on things. Maybe bring over dinner. Megan had mentioned that we were both stressed and that Luna, our dog, had been a handful lately. I wasn't expecting company, but I didn't want to be rude, so I said sure. She arrived around 7. I remember the knock on the door, the smell of Chinese takeout in her arms, and the way she looked, elegant but relaxed, in jeans and a soft gray sweater that hugged her figure. Diane wasn't like other women her age. She had this energy, a quiet confidence that made people pay attention. I opened the door and smiled. Hey, you didn't have to bring food. She shrugged. You looked like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days, she joked, eyeing the cluttered living room and the stack of unopened mail by the door. We sat on the couch, plates balanced on our knees, and started eating. She asked about work, about Megan, about how we were doing. And for a second, I almost lied, almost said we were great. But something in her tone, in the way she looked at me, made me stop pretending. I sighed and admitted it. I don't know if we're okay anymore. Diane didn't flinch. She just nodded slowly, like she already knew. She told me relationships go through seasons, that sometimes love changes, and it's no one's fault. You're still young, she said, but it doesn't mean you're not allowed to feel lonely. The conversation got deeper after that. The wine helped, maybe. Or maybe it was just the silence in the apartment, that soft, echoing emptiness that settles when someone you love has been gone too long. She told me about her marriage, about how it slowly died after years of neglect and secrets. Your body can be in a house, she said, but your heart can be a million miles away. I felt something shift between us, something tender and real. It wasn't flirting, not yet, but it was intimate in a way I hadn't felt in months. Diane didn't just hear me, she saw me. She looked at me with those calm, intelligent eyes, and I didn't feel like a failure or a man on the edge of losing everything. I just felt human, seen, understood. After dinner, we moved to the balcony, sat side by side in the cool night air. The city was quiet, the lights blinking softly in the distance. We didn't say much for a while. And then she touched my hand, not in a seductive way, but gently, almost like comfort. But her fingers lingered. That touch stayed with me long after she left that night. She didn't say goodbye the usual way. Stood at the door for a moment, looked at me like she wanted to say something else, then left with a soft take care of yourself, Daniel. I stood there for a long time after she was gone, staring at the closed door, wondering what the hell had just happened. I didn't kiss her. I didn't cross any line. Not yet, but something in me had changed. Something I couldn't ignore. And the scariest part? It felt good. It happened on a rainy Saturday night, the kind of soft, gray Portland rain that makes the world feel slower, quieter, a little more intimate. Megan was still in Toronto for her conference, texting now and then, mostly about meetings, delayed flights, and how exhausted she was. I told her I missed her, and I did, but the words felt like something I was supposed to say, not something I was aching to. The truth was, I didn't feel connected to her anymore. Not in the way that used to make my chest tighten, just hearing her laugh from the other room. That night, I was curled up on the couch with a blanket and leftover pizza when there was a soft knock at the door. I opened it to see Diane again, no warning, no text, standing there in a navy blue coat, holding a bottle of red wine and a quiet smile. I was nearby. Thought I'd stop in just for a minute, she said, brushing raindrops off her shoulder. I hesitated only a second before stepping aside and letting her in. She smelled like rain and perfume, warm, expensive, a scent I would come to know too well. We sat on the couch, and at first everything felt casual. She poured the wine, handed me a glass, and we talked about books, music, what we missed about being younger. The conversation drifted into more personal places, slower, heavier places. She opened up about how lonely she'd been lately. How even though she had a full life in Seattle, a successful law career, friends, routine, it all felt hollow. I don't let people in easily anymore, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But that night we talked. Felt something I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know what to say, but I felt the same way. Diane didn't feel like Megan's mom in that moment. She felt like a woman. Just a woman. Not defined by her title or role or history, just a person sitting next to me, hurting, longing. The room got quieter. The wine dulled the edges of my thoughts. The tension between us became thick, almost impossible to ignore. Then it happened, subtle, electric. Our eyes met, and I could feel it. Her gaze lingered, soft but certain, and then she reached out and touched my hand again, just like she had the other night. But this time, there was no mistaking it. This wasn't comfort. This was want. My heart was pounding. I knew this was a moment I could stop, could walk away from. I could have stood up, called it a night, closed the door behind her, but I didn't. I stayed. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was stunning, and not in a flashy, obvious way. She was mature, elegant, and full of this quiet strength that made you lean in closer. I leaned in. She did too. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. Then it deepened, and I felt something ignite inside me, something that had been asleep for months. Her lips were warm, searching, and when she whispered my name between breaths, I knew there was no going back. We didn't rush. It wasn't wild or reckless. It was slow, intentional, filled with this aching need to feel something real. We moved to the bedroom without a word. She peeled off her coat, and I stood there, heart racing, watching her move like she had nothing to hide. Her body was beautiful, real, not perfect, but honest. There was a kind of beauty in her vulnerability, in the way she looked at me like she was giving me something sacred. We made love that night. It wasn't just sex, it was emotional. Raw, we held each other for what felt like hours. Our bodies wrapped together like we were trying to erase all the loneliness we'd carried for too long. And yet, as the minutes passed, the guilt crept in like a slow fog. I tried to ignore it, but it settled deep in my chest. Afterward, we lay in silence. Diane traced her fingers along my arm and said nothing for a long time. Then she whispered, "We can't tell her." I nodded, but even that felt like a betrayal. Megan trusted me, loved me. And here I was lying in her bed with her mother. I wanted to feel regret. But the truth is, in that moment, I didn't. I felt alive, seen in a way I hadn't in so long. That's the part that scared me the most. Diane got dressed quietly, gathering her things with this calm that made my stomach twist. At the door, she paused. Her hand on the knob, she turned back to me, her voice steady. "This was a mistake," she said, but her eyes told a different story. There was sadness there, cues, and something else, longing, maybe even hope. Then she was gone. Sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, heart pounding in the dark. The air still smelled like her perfume, the sheets still warm from where she'd lain. I thought about Megan, about how she'd smile when she got home, how she'd throw her arms around me and kiss me like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and I didn't know how to live with what I'd done. Asterisk after that night with Diane. Life didn't just go back to normal, but it pretended to. Megan came home from Toronto late Sunday night, exhausted and dragging her suitcase inside with a sigh. I kissed her at the door, held her tight, and told her I missed her. It was partly true, but I was lying with my arms around her, and I knew it. I had made love to her mother just 2 nights before in the same apartment, in the same bed. The weight of that truth pressed against me like a silent scream I couldn't release. Megan didn't notice. She dropped her bags, slipped off her shoes, and curled up next to me on the couch like we were still okay. And in some ways, we were. We talked, we laughed, and later that night we made love. Slow, sweet, familiar. But I felt different. Every kiss reminded me of Diane's lips. Every whispered word made me wonder what secrets Diane was keeping in her own mind. I tried to lock it away. I told myself it was one mistake, one moment. But it wasn't just a moment. It was a shift. Something inside me had changed, and I could feel it every time I looked at Megan. She didn't deserve the lie I was holding between us. But I didn't know how to tell her the truth either. Diane didn't reach out. Not for days. And I didn't either. But we were both thinking about it. I could feel that. Then one afternoon, while Megan was at work, I got a message. Just one sentence. "Can we talk?" It was her. My heart started racing, guilt and desire, crashing against each other like waves in a storm. I agreed to meet her at a small coffee shop on the edge of town, someplace no one we knew would ever walk into. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window in sunglasses. Her fingers wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. I sat down. She looked at me like she had 1,000 things to say, but she stayed quiet. I broke the silence first. "Are you okay?" I asked, and she nodded slowly. "I don't know what we did," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." I admitted I hadn't either. We talked for nearly an hour, careful not to touch, not to look too long. We knew how dangerous even a glance could be now. She said what we did was wrong, that she felt ashamed. But then she also said it was real, wasn't it? And I couldn't lie. I said yes. Because it was. We promised it wouldn't happen again. We swore it. But promises are fragile when chemistry is stronger than guilt. And over the next few weeks, we kept seeing each other. Not often, but enough. A coffee here, a walk there. Once she came to the apartment again while Megan was working late. I told myself to stop, to shut the door and forget everything. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw the same ache I had in mine. That night, it happened again. Slower, more intense, even more dangerous. The guilt was louder now, pounding in my head, tightening in my chest every time Megan called or texted. But with Diane, I felt wanted in a way I hadn't felt in months. She listened when I talked. She touched me like she meant it. She didn't just look at me, she saw me. I know that sounds selfish, and maybe it was. But in those quiet, stolen hours, it felt like we were the only two people in the world who understood each other. But secrets always grow heavier the longer you carry them. I started pulling away from Megan, not on purpose, but because I didn't know how to fake it anymore. I'd stare at her across the dinner table, wondering if she could see it in my eyes. The guilt, the shame, the betrayal. One night, she reached across the table, touched my hand, and asked, "Are you okay? You've been distant." I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Just work stress," I said. She nodded like she believed me, but her eyes stayed on me longer than usual. She wasn't dumb. She knew something wasn't right. And then came the moment I hadn't prepared for, the three of us in the same room. It was Megan's idea. She wanted to invite her mom over for dinner one Saturday night. "We haven't all hung out in forever," she said cheerfully, completely unaware of the slow-burning disaster waiting to happen. Diane hesitated when she got the invite. She texted me privately first, asking, "Are you sure about this?" But I told her we had to act normal. We had no choice. And so she came. She walked in that evening looking composed but nervous, her eyes flicking toward me only once before she hugged her daughter. The dinner was quiet, tense. Megan didn't seem to notice. She kept talking about work, weekend plans, and a trip to the coast she wanted us all to take together. But under the surface, I was drowning. Every glance, every word between Diane and me was loaded with history. We couldn't speak out loud. When our hands accidentally brushed as we cleared the dishes, it was like a lightning bolt through my body. And I knew then, no matter how hard we tried to pretend, we were in too deep. Megan smiled that night, wrapped her arm around me like everything was perfect. But nothing was. There was a lie sitting in the room with us, silent and sharp, waiting to be discovered. And deep down, I knew that day would come. Because secrets like this never stay buried forever. Asterisk, everything started to fall apart the day Megan found the necklace. It wasn't flashy, just a delicate gold chain with a tiny blue stone, but it didn't belong to her. I'd forgotten Diane left it on my nightstand after one of those quiet stolen nights. And in my rush to erase any trace, I missed it. Megan was cleaning the bedroom while I was out running errands. And when I got home, I knew something was wrong the moment I walked in. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the necklace between her fingers like it was on fire. Her eyes met mine, and I felt like the ground dropped under my feet. She didn't speak at first, just held it up and asked one question. "Whose is this?" My mouth went dry, hesitated too long, and that was all she needed. "Cheating on me?" she asked, her voice quiet but shaking, like she already knew the answer but still hoped I'd lie. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words felt stuck in my throat. I wanted to protect her. I wanted to protect Diane. I wanted to protect myself, but it was too late. Everything was out in the open now, whether I spoke or not. I told her it was a mistake, that I didn't mean for it to happen. That it had only happened once, which was a lie, but I was desperate to soften the blow. Megan stood up, threw the necklace on the floor, and backed away like I was a stranger. Her face turned from shock to heartbreak to rage in a matter of seconds. "Was it someone you work with?" she asked, pacing now. "Someone younger, someone random?" I said nothing. And then, like lightning, I saw the fear in her eyes shift to confusion. "Who is it, Daniel?" she asked again, her voice dropping, and then her face paled. I'll never forget the way she looked at me, like her whole world had cracked open, and she said slowly, "It's not my mom, is it?" The room went silent, the air thickened. I froze, her face twisted, and she let out a sound aisle. Never forget, not quite a scream, not quite a sob. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, no, no." She stumbled backward like she'd been punched in the stomach. Tell me it's not her. Couldn't lie anymore. My silence said everything. She stormed out of the apartment with her phone in her hand, crying and shaking, and I knew immediately where she was going. To her mother, to confront her. I tried to follow, to explain, but she slammed the door in my face. For the next hour, I just sat on the couch staring at the wall, my heart racing, sweat on my forehead. I imagined what was happening across town. Megan yelling, Diane trying to calm her down, both of them broken in different ways. It was the mess I never wanted, but the truth I never stopped walking toward. Later that night, Megan came back, but not alone. She walked in with Diane behind her, both of them looking hollow, like the tears had dried but the damage remained. Megan didn't look at me. Diane did. Her eyes were red, her lips tight, and she said softly, "We need to talk." All of us. We sat in the living room like three strangers, not the way it used to be. Megan's voice was shaking as she spoke. She'd said she felt betrayed, humiliated, shattered. That we had ruined not just her relationship, but her trust in the two people she loved most. She looked at her mom with pure pain in her eyes and said, "How could you?" Diane tried to explain how lonely she had felt. How disconnected we had all become. How one mistake turned into something she didn't know how to stop. But Megan wasn't hearing it. She stood up and said, "You're both disgusting." I wanted to defend myself, but what could I say? I had slept with her mother, lied to her face, broken the kind of boundary that doesn't just bend, it shatters everything. She packed a bag that night, left without saying goodbye. Diane stayed. Behind, sitting in silence, her hands shaking. We both knew there was no going back now. After Megan left, Diane turned to me and said something I didn't expect. "I never meant to take you from her," she whispered. "I just didn't want to feel invisible anymore." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. We sat in silence for a long time, like two people who had lit a fire just to feel warm, not realizing it would burn down everything around us. The days after were quiet and cold. Megan didn't call, didn't text. Her stuff was gone. Her social media wiped clean of any trace of me. Diane went back to Seattle, and we stopped talking too. Whatever was between us was real, but it was wrong. And the wreckage it left behind was too much for either of us to face. I was alone. And for the first time in a long time, I had to sit with that dot, not just the silence, but the weight of the choices that brought me here. Asterisk, it's been 6 months since that night everything came crashing down, since Megan found the necklace. Since the truth exploded like a grenade in our living room and left nothing untouched. I still remember the silence after she left, not just quiet, but the kind that hums in your ears. A silence so thick it wraps around you like punishment. I tried to move on, tried to build something again, but I felt hollow for weeks, like a man walking through smoke and broken glass. The guilt didn't go away, neither did the memories. Every time I walked past the old diner Megan loved or saw a woman with long brown hair laughing in a bookstore, I'd freeze, hoping it was her, fearing it was her. I sent a few messages, nothing heavy, just asking if she was okay, telling her I missed her, but they were all left on read. I don't blame her. I wouldn't forgive me either. I betrayed her in the worst way. Not just with anyone, with her own mother. And even now, it still feels too insane to say out loud. As for Diane, we stopped speaking too. After she left for Seattle, she sent one final message. Whatever we had was real, but it came at too high a price. I'm sorry, I didn't respond. Because I was angry, but because I didn't know what else to say. She had been like a dream, one I chased until I woke up in the wreckage of everything I once loved. And maybe that's all we ever were. Two people trying to feel alive again, clinging to a moment that should never have happened. In the quiet weeks after, I had to face a hard truth, that love, lust, and loneliness can twist together so tightly. You don't know which one is driving you until it's too late. And sometimes, by the time you realize it, you've already broken something you can never put back together. Still, life didn't stop just because I was hurting. Bills needed to be paid. Work deadlines didn't care about my guilt. Friends kept inviting me out, trying to pull me back into the world. Eventually, I started saying yes, not because I felt ready, but because I was tired of being alone with the ache. I went on a few dates, awkward, forced, mostly silent meals with women who were kind. But not Megan. No one was Megan or Diane. And maybe that's a good thing. Because the truth is, I had to relearn who I was when I wasn't caught between two versions of love, one familiar and safe, the other dangerous and intoxicating. One cold morning in February, I saw Megan again. She was walking out of a bookstore downtown, her scarf wrapped tight, a coffee in her hand, her smile faint, but there. I almost didn't recognize her, not because she looked different, but because she looked lighter, freer. She didn't see me at first, but then our eyes met across the street and time stopped. I wanted to run to her, to say I was sorry again, that I still thought about her every night, but I didn't move. I just watched her, and she watched me. No words. Just years of history passing between two people in a 5-second stare. Then she nodded once, a small, polite, heartbreaking gesture, and turned away. That was it. No dramatic ending. No second chance. Just a quiet acceptance that what we had was over. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and realized something important. Love doesn't always end with a bang. Sometimes it ends with a look across the street and the quiet understanding that you ruined something beautiful. I cried for the first time in months. Not because I wanted her back, though maybe. Part of me still did, but because I finally accepted what I did. I let desire blur my morals. Okay, I let loneliness become an excuse. And I hurt someone who never deserved it. Okay, that pain changed me. But maybe that's how we grow. Not from the easy chapters, but from the ones that tear us open. Now, when I think of Diane, it's not with anger, it's with sadness, and maybe a little bit of forgiveness. We both made choices we'll carry forever. But I think we were both trying to feel something real in lives that had gone numb. I don't hate her. Don't hate myself anymore either. I've started writing again, short stories, poems. Things I never had time for when I was busy pretending everything was okay. I walk more. I read more. I cook for myself instead of just ordering takeout. Small things, but they matter. They remind me that life goes on even after the kind of heartbreak that changes you. I don't know if I'll ever fall in love again. Not rushing it. I know one thing for sure. Next time, I'll be better. I'll be honest. I'll choose someone not just because they see me, but because I can look at myself in the mirror and know I deserve to be loved back. Without lies, without betrayal, without secrets. This story doesn't have a fairy tale ending, but maybe it has a real one. And maybe that's enough.